Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody who might be here. It always takes a minute for StreamYard to show me that anybody's here or not. So we'll see. Hello. There's some people. Feel free to say hi in the comments if you're here, and where you're reading from. And yeah, this is our final discussion for Hinds Feet on High Places. This section was a little bit shorter, and I honestly don't think it's going to have quite as much for us to discuss, but we'll still wrap it up and talk through the end of it. So we might be done a little bit earlier today. While people are still settling in, do you guys want to just one last time introduce yourselves and your channel? And how did you feel about the ending? Like, as a whole, it wrapped up now. Did you like how it ended? Were you hoping for something different? Whatever. Just how did you like? We'll go clockwise. So Chrissie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chrissie, Chrissie's Purple Library. I mainly read fantasy, science fiction, Christian science fiction, fantasy, thrillers, all the things. So overall, I really liked this part of the book. I think the ending was my favorite part of the book. I was really touched by the ending of it. I was very moved. I had tears. Seeing Much Afraid and her journey, and then also connecting with it as well. So it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's me next. Hi, everyone. My name is Oceana from Oceana. Gotta Read 'Em All. And I read a lot of Christian fiction and romance and a lot of other things too. Lots of random stuff. I liked the book a lot. I just love the metaphor of the Christian life, and it worked for me. I liked it a lot, and I'm glad that I was a part of this discussion. Sorry I missed last week, but I'm happy to be here today. And yeah, it's really encouraging reading these kind of things, just to remember. Yeah, that's me.
Nice. Bethany.
Hi, I'm Bethany from Bethany's Bookshelf, and I really loved this book overall. This last section was a little more challenging for me, but I think that was just maybe me rushing through it a little bit or not taking the time to really soak it all in. And sometimes allegory gets a little hard for me, and so I have to slow down and think through it. But overall, I loved it.
Nice. I really thought the ending was just a really nice way to end Much Afraid / Grace and Glory's journey. I thought it was just very positive, and it left us I don't know. I felt the ending was just really beautiful. Her time relaxing and then with a shepherd, and we'll get into all of that as we go through the final few chapters. Thanks everybody for being here. We've got Shauna and Amanda's here. Call Me Cubby is here. Had me crying. Oh, I love it. Jeanette is here. Hi, Jeanette. Judy. Hope is here from Tennessee. Glenda. Oh yeah, Glenda said she thought this one, we were just talking about this. She thought this was the Sanderson one. No, that's at 6:30 on Zoom. That one will be later on Zoom, Glenda. We're so glad that you're here. Lisa, hello. Enjoyed it. And Glenda read Hinds Feet a long time ago. I'm really glad I did a reread of it. I did not remember much of it. So it was like reading it for the first time. So this part that we're talking about today is just part 2. That's a whole separate section, and mine calls it Joy Cometh in the Morning, which thank God. Thank God joy cometh in the morning. We're not left without. I felt like, it just concluded everything. It just and left her on a path to continue. So I think that that's really nice. We're going to dive right into chapter 17, Healing Streams. And just like every week, feel free to share thoughts or comments about each chapter as we go through it. We're going to kind of highlight different parts that stood out to us. We're not giving a summary, really. We're just kind of talking about what was impactful for us and what stood out, any questions we might have had, all that type of thing. Feel free to share your highlights and lowlights and questions and whatnot in the comments. So yeah, healing streams.
I do want to start by saying at the first meeting that we had, I was like, I think it's a deer. Like, that's what I'm picturing. But then I noticed in chapter 9, she says she's a human. So then from then on, I was like, okay, I'm picturing a human.
Yeah.
So that helped.
Yeah.
Because it was a funny visual. But so I'm picturing a human now. And I liked it a lot, this chapter. I always say if I could make anything be real, I would pick like purity water that would like make anything perfect that you like put into it, including like your body. So I'd put like my nails into it so they'd always be perfect or whatever it is, like kind of random silly things. And that's what I was picturing when I read this. I'm like, oh, she found her perfect water. That's healing her body. I thought that was cool because I relate to it.
Yeah. I love the promise fulfilled. Like right from the beginning, that was one of the things she was looking forward to at the beginning of her journey. He's going to give her Hinds Feet so she can jump around on the rocks. And she kind of always had walked crooked and lame, crippled, different things. But even her face said was crooked, and she just received that complete healing, which was the fulfillment of that promise. And I just thought that was really, really beautiful. But even before that, I'm like, it's just so this chapter, and it talks about peace at the end, but it just felt so peaceful to me. Like when she wakes up from this kind of traumatic experience that we ended on in the last chapter, and then she just kind of is laying there, and it's a beautiful scene, and it's just described so beautifully. The flowers are out, the birds are singing, like I could just picture like the wind gently blowing through the grass and the leaves. I don't know. I just pictured it such a place of peace. And I really loved, I've loved all the way through her nature descriptions. I think are just so beautiful and really vivid. Like you can really picture what's going on around them in nature. And I thought the nature in this was also very beautiful. Yeah. Like the rocky cave had sunbeams that were pouring in, were warm and quiet and drenched with sweet perfume. I don't know. It's just such lush descriptions, which I don't normally get excited about. Like descriptive writing doesn't always do it for me, but it really did in this book. Mm-hmm. I also loved right at the end, she had gone into the pool already. She came up and was totally healed. She was wandering around. The sun was glowing on the water, and she felt completely encompassed by peace, and a great inner quietness and contentment drowned every feeling of curiosity, loneliness, and anticipation. So even like the good feelings of anticipating what's coming next, or the loneliness, she feels she's here in this place all by herself. And she might be curious about it, but that inner peace was the strongest feeling. And I just loved that. Like when we're truly at peace, it's just it like drowns out everything else, because that feeling of peace is so all encompassing. And I love that picture of peace.
Yeah. Like right after that, she did not think about the future at all. So like no worries about the future or what she could do next. She was just like really present in the moment. Yeah, that's so hard to do.
Yeah, that whole ending, I just kind of put a little line on the outside. I'm like, I just love her contentment. She's just in a place of such content right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful, because I agree with Sheena. Like that sentence was like the one that really spoke to me, because it's like, when the Lord heals you, he heals those places in your heart. It's like you don't worry about the future. Mm-hmm. Like the whole time you're thinking, oh, I just want the answer. Like, I just want to know why this happened to me. Tell me the why. And it's like when you get healed, the why doesn't matter. you're healed, you know, and it's like, and you don't worry about the future because, you know, like the Lord has made you secure in him.
Mhm.
Like, you know, I think that's Proverbs 31. I think the Proverbs 31, she rejoices in time to come. She doesn't worry about the future, you know. It's just beautiful chapter for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved this too, Amanda, when she realized that the smell of the perfume was coming from the wound that she thought was expecting to see on her chest, the wrappings or whatever, and she pulled that off, and there was no trace of a wound. It was like total healing. And then Shauna continues that thought after that altar scene. That was, I mean, we ended chapter 16 on a pretty bleak, like dire type of a note, but there was now in this chapter no trace of that aching stiffness or pain in her body that she had struggled with even before she steps into the water. It doesn't say she hobbled over to the water. Like there already was healing that had taken place in her body before she even went into the water. And I just love that all the former things had passed. My grandmother had many leg surgeries, was unable to walk much later in her life. When she passed, we talked about the healing. Yeah. Love that. So good. So we'll just continue on. That was a super short chapter. So we'll just continue on to chapter 18. Hinds Feet.
This one's so good. I liked a lot in this one.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I love it right from the beginning, though, on the third day. So I'm like, I love the number 3 shows up all the time in the Bible. And here we go. She's been in this place of peace and contentment and not worrying about tomorrow for 3 days on her own. And I love that. It wasn't like an immediate, the shepherd shows up right after she stepped in the water, or like she just found her peace there and stayed there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then we continue on. I love it. 18 got me crying.
Can we talk about her name though?
Oh man. Yeah.
Like when he said, "From henceforth you are grace and glory." Like what? Because she needed a lot of grace on her journey. She was her little cold heart. She was tripping, you know, the whole time.
Yeah.
as we do. You know, but when he gave her name, it just. And then when she realized who her friend, am I getting ahead of myself? I'll just leave that there. When he gave her name, it took me out.
Yeah. Oh, and I love the verse that goes with it, Psalm 84:11, because grace and glory isn't something she had to work up on her own. It's the Lord gives those things. The Lord is grace and glory, and he gives those things. So the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them who walk uprightly. Yeah. It's a beautiful name. Even before that, when the shepherd does show up and he starts springing up the great wall of the canyon, for the first time, she immediately, it says, much afraid, did not hesitate one instant. In every other situation, she was like, wait a minute, can I do this? This looks hard. Am I going to be able to do it? She always hesitated. And I underline that because I'm like, yeah, girl, go. Like she has spent this time in God's presence, like kind of in this place of peace. And he called her out and they start going. And she's like, she did not hesitate one instant. I love it. In a moment, she was on the rock herself. The flying leap. She reached the I love it. She didn't even.
Yeah, that's inspiring.
Yeah. And I just love how the shepherd is portrayed in here, because as they're climbing up, he's like, hey, you with the hinds feet over here. It's like just the little bit of humor and love, just the tenderness that he dealt with her all throughout, even in these chapters, I just think is so beautiful.
I like that it says he carried her up to the high places. So she did jump into his arms, and so that was effort. But then once she was held by him, he did the rest of the work to bring her up to the peak. So I liked that visual too. And then that's where he gave her new name. Yeah, so it's not like we're doing it by our own strength.
Yeah.
I loved when he explained to her like about the flower of love and how she was like that was burned. Like she didn't understand that that was the longing to be loved part only, and his love was there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that got me because he called her plant that had been rooted out the plant of longing to be loved. And I'm like, ooh, I felt that. Like, and that's the one that had to get ripped out so that his love could truly bloom in her. Yeah. That hit me a little bit. Let's see. Shauna said, I was really moved when her reflection went back to the stones. There could have been no jewels now to his praise and glory, no crown for her to wear. Oh yeah, like as she was remembering, what would I have done if I had gotten rid of all those when she went through them a couple chapters ago?
Yeah.
Amanda cried when were you there all the time when I thought you had forsaken me? How she took his hands in hers in tears of joy. Beautiful.
That was so good.
Yeah. Yeah, the verse we just read. Mm-hmm. I love, yeah. So, Chrissie, you were starting to talk about this when sorrow and suffering got new names as well.
Yeah, that is so good because I think it's in Isaiah when he says he exchanges our beauty for ashes. And so she had all of this suffering and the sorrow, even in her journey, and it changed into joy and peace. Like, what? And that was just so relatable. It's like such sorrow can be turned to joy.
Yeah.
You know, it was just so beautiful. And that they were on a journey too. Like they were like, yeah, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had a purpose too. And so that was so refreshing. I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that. So that was very nuanced. And I like how she did that. Like they were on a journey with her. They didn't want her to stop, because they wanted to be transformed too. So there was just as much of an allegory as well as the Lord remade everything new for everybody,
Yeah.
So.
And I was thinking of it literally like from the high places, we can look back and see how, like, in light of that perspective that God gives us, we can see how our suffering can be turned to joy. Because in the moment, we don't see it. But when we look back and from that heavenly or that like heavenly mindset or that eternal mindset from the godly mindset, that's when we can see how we can have joy and peace in the midst of that sorrow and suffering too. And how he redeems all of those moments and situations for his glory.
Yeah, that's how I like it. I have to remember his faithfulness through every situation. Like it's really hard in the moment to trust him, and I freak out, whatever it is, like just like much afraid. But then I guess having those altars to remember what he brought you through, and then you just hope next time you trust him a little bit more. And yeah, just looking back and reflecting on what God has done is so important to be able to move forward with more peace. Yeah. So yeah, I liked that too. That she did think back to all the times where he was there, but she just didn't know.
And I love that. I loved this too. That she was hoping, like, she thought back. She's like, oh, but what about sorrow and suffering? They went through all of this as well. Like, she wanted them to have some of the experience that she was having. And then when she realized it was them, there was just so much joy there as well. I thought that was really beautiful. Beautiful too. Love it. To all who mourn, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair, that the Lord has planted for his own glory. I love it. Ooh, look at that. The planting. The Lord plants it, and it takes time for plants to grow.
And then like the stones becoming her crown.
Mm.
Like everything about her journey was transformed. And like that is like the suffering and sorrow is the glory. Like, oh my God. This was an amazing chapter. I think it's probably my favorite chapter of the whole book, actually.
Yeah.
In hindsight.
Yeah.
And the words that were given to her, I think then when she was about to throw away the stones, the hold fast that thou hast, that no man take thy crown.
Mm.
And then they turned into her crown.
I love it. I'm like rereading it as I'm sitting here. I need to stop reading it. I'm like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Because I think, Oceana, you kind of referred to this, but like the temptation, I mean, it's hard in the moment to see what God is doing. And she acknowledges that it says she marveled at the grace and love and tenderness and patience, which had led and trained and guarded and kept poor faltering much afraid, which had not allowed her to turn back and which now changed all her trials into glory. Like she recognized it didn't come from herself. Even that ability to stay she was in training and she was guarded and she was protected and led and kind of brought through those tough things so that it could all be turned to his glory. I love it. Love. Everything meant to crush us becomes our crown. Mm. Yep. An idea I have used to help remember all God has done is each night write 5 things that God did or showed me. Oh, I love that, Jennifer. I have lots of notebooks full. In discouraging moments, I can flip back. That's so cool. Those you're like at the end of every day picking up a stone for the day. Like, here's what God's teaching me right now. I love that.
Wow.
That's very cool. Beautiful. I just feel like I read these chapters with such a smile. Like they were just so, like, I don't know. Anytime that fulfillment of a promise happens, or like the final, I don't know. I just love it. There's so much joy in it too.
I think because Much Afraid was just so weak at the beginning, and we watched her go through all of this, and she's so relatable to us, and then to see that she made it, and now she's like experiencing the peace and the joy of sticking on this path, even though she could have turned around so many times. It's so inspiring because it's like, if she can do it, we can do it. That's how I find.
Yeah.
Oh, Glenda asked if anyone listened to it. I actually did. I used those YouTube videos for every chapter that Amanda showed me, and the narration was great, and so I just read along with it, and I really enjoyed doing that. So yeah, I'd recommend listening to it too.
I know Katie also listened to the audiobook. She's not feeling well today, so she couldn't be with us, but she also enjoyed the audio. All right, should we carry on to the next one?
Yeah.
High places.
It just sounds so beautiful the way that it's described.
I have a full page
Oh, wow.
watercolor on this chapter. And I love that they got to stay for a few weeks, it says. They were there, stayed up on the high places for several weeks, exploring around, learning, continuing to learn from the king. Soaking it in. It kind of made me think of like, I don't know, when we were younger and talking about camp being like a mountaintop experience, or we have these different moments or experiences, a retreat or a conference or something. And it's just like, you're kind of taken out of your world for a period of time and like just allowed to have extra services and like that extra time in God's word and extra time fellowshipping with other people who love God. And it does feel like that kind of mountaintop experience where you kind of pulled away from reality. It's still reality, but pulled away from your normal life for a few bits, days, whatever. And kind of on this high, like everything is just kind of good at the moment, even if it's not good when you go back to life, but like kind of pulled away. And that's what this felt like to me. Like they were just given this time to relax and continue to learn from the king and explore and be at peace and have joy and share this time with each other. I love that this part wasn't just her. Before, she was 3 days kind of on her own right after the altar. And now she's with others, and that fellowship is a part of the joy that's there too. But yeah, that's what this made me think of. I wasn't thinking like heaven because it's not the end of her life, but it's just like those special times that God gives us where, yeah, we can really hear clearly when we're reading his word. And it's just like, oh yeah, God is speaking today. That's like a high place moment, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's so refreshing. I grew up going to Bible camps, and every year it was such a highlight to like just remember how amazing God is, and like, yes, I want to live this life with him. And
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's a great reminder. It's so refreshing. It's so fun. Like, yeah, that's how I agree. This is very much like that.
That helps me so much to think of it like that, because this is where I kind of started to struggle a little bit, because I was like, is she saying that this is like heaven? Like I kind of got confused, and then, but that makes so much sense to me.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about it too, because I think she said in this chapter, I think is where we see that there's even higher places that they're not going to yet. Like they're at this high place, but I'm like, isn't that like our walk though too? Like we don't learn everything at the first high moment. Like we learn new, and we get this renewed excitement to continue to learn and to continue to spend that time with the Lord. And then life comes back in and okay. And then we learn something different about who he is, and we learn a little deeper. I think I wrote in one of is that this chapter? Yeah. I said, the more we know, the more we know how much more we need to know, right? Like the closer we get to God, the greater our understanding of who he is, the more we know, oh, there's so much more about his character that's still there for me to learn and know. Like, and we will never fully understand and fully grasp the fullness of who God is, but he gives us these glimpses and these times where we feel that closeness and we feel that excitement. But there is always, and then when we get there, we're like, oh, but there's so much more. And you realize, or you hear someone else's testimony, you're like, oh, that's so amazing that you got to experience that part of God. Like, and our faith can grow even in those times when we hear other people sharing. I feel like the closer you get to God, the more you realize there is to know about him. And that's what that felt like. That's how I pictured these high places. Cause I think you could, and I don't know if I said this on the live, but I was reading one review where someone's like, or I got a comment or something that was like, be careful. This is kind of like Hindu teaching or whatever. And I feel like you could interpret this like levels of Christianity, and like you get to this level, but you're really more of a Christian if you get to this level, or like, or in, I don't know much about the Hindu religion or other religions, but like the better you are and the more of a good person you are, the higher level you get to spend eternity or whatever. I don't know if that's the case, but I think you could interpret that in this chapter in particular. You could see that, but that's not how I viewed it when I was reading it. So I don't know. I also loved it. It says she began to understand that truth cannot be understood from books alone or by any written words, but by personal growth and development and understanding. And I mean, I kind of interpreted this: things written even in the book of books can be astonishingly misunderstood, while one still lives on the low levels of spiritual experience. I'm like, oh, I don't love that, like low levels, but how true is that? The deeper our understanding of who God is, the better we can interpret his word. The more we know about him and the more we know about scripture, even the better we are at figuring it out.
Yeah.
I don't remember what verses this is from, but I'm pretty sure somewhere it talks about like milk and then solid food. That's kind of what that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And I love that her reaction is all she could do is gasp with wonder, awe, and thanksgiving, and to long with all her heart to go higher and to see and understand more. Like that should be our reaction. Like we're so thankful for all that we know now and all that God has revealed to us and showed us. And we're in awe and we're in wonder of who he is. But there's still that love. Like, I want more of that. I want to know you more. I want to have a deeper understanding. I want to go higher. I want to go to the next level because I want to know more of you. So yeah, I liked that section there.
Yeah, I really liked at the end when he's asking her all the things that she learned. And the fourth thing, she said, every circumstance in life, no matter how crooked and distorted and ugly it appears to be, if it is reacted to in love and forgiveness and obedience to your will, can be transformed. I think I said that right. So, you know, and then she says, my Lord, you purposely allow us to be brought into contact with the bad and evil things that you want changed. And like, that conviction came, like, popped me right in the face, you know, because it's always, that's really the whole point of it. Like, he wants us being transformed conforming to the image of his son. And so he's always going to dip us in that refining fire. He's always gonna, like you were saying, grandma said, each round gets higher and higher, baby, you know? And so, yeah, that was incredibly powerful, like forgiveness and obedience. Yeah.
Yeah, I also highlighted like as she was reviewing all the different things that she learned, point by point. I was like, underline.
I love that third part where she was saying, like, you didn't regard me as lame and weak. You saw me as I would be when you had done what you had promised and brought me to the high places. And you always treated me with the same love and graciousness as though I were a queen already and not wretched little much afraid.
So sweet. And then it shows like how she says, I cannot tell you how greatly I want to regard others in the same way. So that's how it's supposed to be. Like, we see what he's done for us, and how can we not like show that same grace to others, because we know how much we've been forgiven. So I thought that was really good.
I just wanted to, Shauna also was feeling kind of the same as you about the high places thing. Camp analogy makes sense. Reminds me of the Amy Grant song about the mountaintop. I don't know that one. Maybe if I heard it, I might, because I loved Amy Grant back in the day. Yeah, thinking of it being heaven got confused due to what happens next. Yeah. The last verse says, but I've got to come down from that mountaintop to the people in the valley below, or they'll never know that they can go to the mountain of the Lord. Love it. That's the Amy Grant song. You need milk, not solid food. Yes, there's the verse. Everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness since he is a child. And another one. Long for the pure spiritual milk and may grow into salvation. 1 Peter. Nice. Yeah, I really liked after she goes through those 4 lessons. I think, Chrissie, you kind of slightly talked about it, but she's talking to the Lord. Therefore, I begin to think you purposely allow us to be brought into contact with the bad and evil things that you want changed. Perhaps it's the very reason why we are here in this world, where sin and sorrow and suffering and evil abound, so that we may let you teach us so to react to them that out of them we can create lovely qualities to live forever. That the only really satisfactory way of dealing with evil, not simply binding it, but overcoming it with good ultimately.
I was listening to the last part, like the lessons or whatever, and there was a part that I couldn't find to highlight, but it was basically saying how, like, when we get to heaven, like, everyone's going to be easy to love, so we're learning, like, to love the difficult people here, and like learning that type of love, because it's going to be easy in heaven.
That kind of transitions us into the next chapter, Return to the Valley. Where they look out over and see her little valley of humiliation and start to reflect on the people that are still there. And I think she does start to have different eyes towards them, see them from a different perspective. Instead of just her enemies and the ones who are trying to keep her from following the shepherd and keep her afraid, she starts to, it says, a pang of compassion and pain shot through her heart. Like, she started to have more compassion for them. And realizing, like, the deeper issues that are going on with each of them, and kind of goes through character by character.
Yeah, I think that relates too to how, again, because she's been changed by the king, she sees everyone with new eyes of, like, if he can change me, can't he change others too?
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was a really great, like, I guess, wrap up to her growth. Because, yeah, it just gives you eyes to see others in a new way too. So you see yourself in a new way through this journey, and then you start to see others too. And I think that is, like, the whole point of like Christian fellowship and evangelism and all the things of, like, there's a space for everyone to come to him. No one is, like, too far gone, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it was, I think it was the part after where she says she's, categorizing everyone. She says she could scarcely bear the thought, yet for so many years, she had not only feared, but also condemned them, had actually disdained their misery, and then telling herself it was their own fault. Yes, she detestable, fear enslaved, much afraid, had actually dared to disdain them for the things which made them so wretched and ugly, when she herself was equally wretched and enslaved. And so that was she has such humility now, because she realized she was literally just like them. But because the Lord changed her heart and put his heart and his love in her, she can, like you said, Oceana, she could see the truth of what it really means to love people and to suffer along with people, right? Long suffering, right? It's just powerful. Yeah. I think I said Conviction City. I don't know why. Yeah, put that.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, yeah, we're all out here in faith, learning and growing, in the Lord. And so it's by his grace and mercy that we can even love again. Yeah.
So this Bible study thing points us to Ephesians chapter 2, where it says, "And you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the ways of the world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of our body and mind, and were by nature children of wrath, like the rest of mankind. But God, being rich in mercy because of the great love which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace in kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you've been saved through faith. This is not your own doing, it's the gift of God. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. But that describes what's happening in this chapter so clearly. Like, she's realizing I was them. Like, that was me. And I was trapped in that way of thinking and miserable and blaming other people and all of that. But for the grace of God.
Yeah.
That was me. I loved, because they're all kind of all together, I guess. And Joy has a response to it, but I love what Peace said. Quietly. I love that Peace spoke quietly, but she said, I've noticed that when people are brought into sorrow and suffering or loss or humiliation or grief or into some place of great need, they sometimes become ready to know the shepherd and to seek his help. So sometimes we're brought to that place so that we're more open and ready when God is ready to show us the next thing or to change us in another way or rip out some other sin from our heart, right? Like that. But he sometimes has to bring us to that point of some low point, tough situation, so that we are ready when he's ready to change us.
Yeah, I always find when I am struggling, I call out to him way more than when life is just okay. And I'm like, oh, I don't really need him right now. But it's like, no, you need him every day. But it's just harder to see it. But when you're brought to your knees and there's nowhere else to turn, it's much easier to turn to him.
Yeah, for sure. I love Shauna. I didn't even see that you had just written out that same part. Yep, we're on the same wavelength. Love it. Oh, man. Amanda's reminded how we always need to share what he's done for us and share in the gospel of Christ and have empathy for others.
I thought it was sweet, her conversation with the shepherd too, about all of her family members, and his responses about each one. Like, the way that it was written, it's just so clear that he like aches for them too and loves them and wants them to choose him, but they're just so blinded that they won't listen to his voice. But I thought I liked the interaction between her and the king about each one.
Yeah, he said a couple times, I know her, or I know him.
I know, that was so...
He's so unhappy, or I know him well. You don't exaggerate when you speak of his wretchedness. I've had to interfere and chastise him many times. But I've not given him over unto death. I love it that he just, I agree. I saw that compassion in that. Like, I know him. I'm like, I want that. I want that one. That love is there.
And then it really shows how much she's changed, because she wants them to know him. And then she said, she cried joyfully, we will go down there with you and speak to them. Like, who would have thought that she'd want to go back there? But it just really shows her transformation, that she now like sounds like she loves them and she cares about them and she wants them to come know the king.
Yeah. I could just feel it like building as she first starts talking about her relatives and like just like recognize it. Like, she's just starting to see them with a different perspective. And she's like, and this one, they're so wretched because da 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 da. Oh, and this one. And it's like the light bulb is coming on. She's like realizing that they weren't just out to get her. They're not just miserable for miserable sake. Like, there's deeper things going on. And you could feel like her passion and her love for them, her compassion and love and passion, like you could feel it building. And so when he finally says, these unhappy souls we are speaking about will not allow me into their homes or even permit me to speak to them. I need a voice to speak to me. I underline that. Like, that's our call, right? Like, he needs us, because sometimes people are not ready or willing to hear from the Lord, and persuade them to let me help them. And this is where she said that joyfully. I see what you mean. She cried joyfully. Let's go. She's like, we're going to go down with you, and we're going to speak to them and show them what you've done for us and what you're willing and able to do for them.
And I wonder at the beginning of the book if that's who Valiant was.
Yeah.
Right? Because she shows up and she's right there. And so when I read that, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
She was already there in the valley, you know? It's just, and we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. How is anyone going to know that Christ is real if they don't believe it in you and see it in you through your life, you know? Because people just want to know that they are loved and understood.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that only you can say to someone. They're like, oh, I needed to hear that from Oceana. I couldn't hear that from somebody else. I couldn't hear that, you know, I had to hear it from, you know, so it's, God is so good.
He knows us so well. He understands humans really well, and how weak we are and afraid we are. And it's just, stories like this, just seeing his amazing love and grace over us. It's so beautiful.
I love how he allows her to realize stuff too. Like, he doesn't just tell her, we're looking down there because look at all of your family members. Like, there's all, like, he didn't teach her with words. Like, he just kind of allowed her to realize it. And even after he says, I need someone to speak for me, he says, do you think they will listen to you? He said, smiling at her very gently. Cause he's like, do you think they're going to listen to you? Like, think back. Like, and she still has that real, like, humility. Like, no, like, they probably won't at first. Cause I didn't treat them very well either back in the day. Like, you're going to have to, and I love this. You will tell me what to say. You will teach me and I'll say it for you. That she's like, I was not good to them. Like, they weren't good to me, but I wasn't good to them either. And so they might not listen at first, but you can show me the things to say and I'll speak what you have to tell them. I love that.
Yeah.
So good.
I love that she's like so secure in him now that she feels confident and safe to return to them.
Yeah.
Not afraid that she'll be affected by them. She just wants to be effective.
Right.
In their lives.
Yeah. None of that fear from before is there. And then we're looking at the waterfall.
Oh, and there's a verse. And Shauna, you probably gonna pull this verse up, girls, but I'm gonna read it because I know you holding our scriptures down in chat. So we appreciate you.
That's right.
It says, for he loves each one of us, she said to herself, as though there were only one to love. That's one of my favorite scriptures. Like, and that's how it feels. You're like, oh man, he loves each and every single human being. Like, you were the only one. Like, he left the 99 for the one.
Yeah.
But we were all the one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you like feel that, you start to experience that through life and through faith. It's just like, I want everyone to experience that. Like, you know, it's so good. This was the best part of the book. Like, this third act, or part two, part three. Yeah, part two. It's good. Very inspiring.
Yeah. Then they go joyfully bounding down the mountain. I love the joy that's there. Because when you I feel like for me, sometimes the idea of talking to other people about the Lord can be intimidating, knowing the types of responses you might get, right? There's not this joy in my heart. So clearly God's doing a work still. But like the joy and the eagerness that she has. She even says, like, this is why he brought me up here. It's not so that he could heal my feet. It's not so that he could heal my face. It's not so that he could take away my fear. She says, he brought me to the heights just for this. She whispered to herself. She nodded at him like, yep, I'm ready. Let's go. Come on. Grasping that, one of the pastors at my church, my campus pastor, I have, like, you look up evangelism, you'll see a little Pastor Mark's face, because he has this joy in telling other people about Jesus that I have not seen, legitimately, I've not seen in other people. Like, he gets so excited to tell other people about the Lord, and he is constantly leading people to Christ in Walmart, at the gas station, like wherever he goes, he is just ready. Okay, God, who you want me to talk to? And he has this eagerness that makes me, like, that's what made me think of when I was reading this. I'm like, oh, that's Pastor Mark. He's like, okay, let's go. Let's tell them all. He's like, and I love that. It's so inspiring to see, like, that I know someone in my life right now that has this kind of joy, because it's still a little intimidating to me, but it's also so inspiring. Yeah, and catchy. Like, I want to be a part of that. Like, I want to be a part of that. God's done a work in my life. I want to tell other people. But yeah, I love that it's joy. It's not with a sense of mission. It's not with a burden of, okay, now I need to go do this. It's like, oh, let's go. This is why he rescued me. This is why he saved me. This is why he healed me, so that we can go back and tell other people. Come on.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. And they begin leaping and springing down the mountain. There's the deer for you. Leaping and springing, bounding from rock to rock. I love it.
She got her feet, y'all. She got her feet. Whoa. God is a healer.
Oh, amen.
It makes me curious about the author, like, and really anyone who can write a book like this. How well do you have to know God's character to be able to write something like this? Does anyone know anything about this author? Like, I'm assuming she's not alive.
Well, if I could read the rest of this book, there's a biography. I didn't read the rest of it, but mine does have, so there's a section called Lessons Learned on the Slopes of High Places. And maybe, Bethany, I feel like you read this part.
Some of it.
Some of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So like,
you skimmed through. So this is like about the time when she was in the Swiss Alps and like writing this book. But then also I have a brief autobiography of Hannah Hurnard that I also did not read. But those are for another day. I was kind of done.
Yeah, I read a little bit of it. It seems as if she had an encounter, like how I read a little bit, like she had an encounter with the Lord. And it just comes from, like what she said, books can't teach you. It's just a personal experience. And that's from my skimming. I did a very minimal skimming. That seems to be what she said of how it happened for her. But to Krista, very interesting. She was afraid too, because she had a stutter and she didn't want to speak. It was hard for her. And she had a lot of wrath and rebellion in her heart too. And she didn't know how she was going to be a missionary and speak to people. She didn't even know how people looked at her, like she was crazy, because she's, has a stutter. She doesn't like being around people. She's socially awkward, all this stuff. And she went anyway, I know it sounds like I read all of it, but I did. That's just the part that I skimmed.
I remember part of it too. I think she was saying when she felt like God was telling her to write this book, and she was like, I can't spell. I'm not good at, like, just all these things. Like, she didn't think that was something she could do. But I love too, there was a part, I did highlight some of it, where she was praying and said, teach me to understand the language spoken by your creation all around me. And like, that's so obvious in this book that she was learning from creation. And then the other part that I underlined was, it said, for faith has nothing to do with intellectual belief. Faith is obedience. Faith and abandonment to God's will and power. are inseparable. Faith is willingness to do God's will. Unwillingness to abandon one's own will and to obey God is unbelief.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, someday I might read those other. I mean, she has quite a few books.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mountain of Spices is the one that's maybe a sequel. This one just says it's another allegory about human weakness and strength, comparing the spices in Song of Solomon to the fruits of the Spirit. Kind of interesting. I think that's the other allegory. Yeah. Any other? Oh, here's the leave the 99 for the one, Shona. I love it. If a man have 100 sheep and one of them gone astray, does he not leave the 90 and the 9 and go into the mountains and seek that which has gone astray? Matthew 18:12. A song called One by One. God's individual love for us. Yeah, there's the verse you were talking about. I wonder if one point of this part is that sometimes we have to experience a measure of healing before our perspective changes. Yeah. She wanted her family to have what she experienced, no matter what they had done. There was forgiveness. Absolutely. Wants them to choose him. Love it. Yeah. Cool. Well, I feel like we kind of wrapped it up. It was a beautiful ending to Much Afraid's journey, Grace and Glory's journey. Oh, man. And I appreciate you ladies for joining in the discussion live, and Shauna, our resident Bible scholar, finding the verses for us, Amanda being here every week, and others who have been here with us through these discussions. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining in. It was a little different this time, not exactly a nonfiction, but still something that I feel like was impactful, and that God can use to speak to us. So thank you for joining in. Reading Hinds Feet on High Places. Beautiful.
Yay. It was great.
Yes. Thank you for making me finally read it.
Yay. And we will be, maybe not these ladies, but I will have another group of ladies, possibly some of these guys too. I don't remember. I have a list started somewhere. In November will be our next group, will be my next group read along. And in November, we're going to be reading Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson. I first learned about this book. I love how that blue matches my shirt so perfectly. Sorry, squirrel. I first learned about this from Chantel Reads All Day, and she just loved it. I don't even remember exactly what it's about. But this little sentence at the top says, making something beautiful in a broken world can be harrowing work, and it can't be done alone. So I know Andrew Peterson is an author, a songwriter, a musician. So he's very much a creative. And I think this is going to talk a lot about creativity and bringing light into the dark with that, like being a light with the creative side of things. And how we can use that to impact the world. And so I feel like it's going to be interesting, something a little different again, maybe not just our Christian life, but in a different way. So feel free to pick this one up if you find it somewhere, and plan to read along in November. So I will put out dates and all that stuff probably mid-October. But thank you, Chrissie and Oceana and Bethany, and also Chantel and Katie, who aren't here with us. Thanks for joining me. I really, really love having other people to discuss things with. It makes my day. I don't have their channels. I think I forgot to put the links in this description, but I'll go do that as soon as I close. So if you're watching this later or now and you're not already following these ladies on YouTube, they're wonderful and you should do that. So at least check them out and say hello. But for real, subscribe and like all the things.
Thanks, Krista.
But you guys are the best, and thank you so much. And we'll see you in November, or probably before then. But yeah,
Bye.
you guys are the best. Bye.